families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Families Divided TV. Many of you are going through alienation or estrangement from your adult children. This is a horrible experience that many of us, including myself, have to deal with. Sometimes it's unbearable. Sometimes you think it could be the most horrible experience you've ever had. In this episode of Families Divided, Dr. Colleen Murray is going to be speaking with Dr. Joshua Coleman on his book, Rules of Estrangement. And while he's speaking to us, he's going to be telling us why adult children cut these ties and how you can heal the conflict and get by even through this time. So we're going to be seeing and hearing from Dr. Joshua Coleman right after these messages.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Hello, and welcome to this segment of Families Divided. We've talked a lot on this program about alienation, but now we're going to shift to a different kind of destructive relationship pattern, and that's estrangement. And to help us better understand this, we'll be talking with Dr. Joshua Coleman about his book, Rules of Estrangement: Why Adult Children Cut Ties and How to Deal with the Conflict. Welcome to our show today, Dr. Coleman. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to have you with us today. So for those in our audience that aren't as familiar with the idea of estrangement, could you just briefly explain to them what estrangement is and how it's different from alienation?
Well, the way I think about it, Colleen, I think of alienation as a subset of estrangement. So I use estrangement kind of in the way that it's commonly used by sociologists and psychologists, which is really any kind of a cut off or very distant or strained relationship, in my particular area, between parents and adult children. So that can happen from parental alienation when one parent poisons the child against the other parent, either covertly or overtly. That's only one pathway to estrangement. There's also what some might refer to as justifiable estrangement, say if the parent was abusive or neglectful and is willing to make amends. But then there's also a bunch of other ways that parents and adult children can become estranged. Say, for example, a really troubled daughter-in-law or son-in-law who says to the adult child, choose them or me, you can't have both. Or certainly mental illness in the parent, but also mental illness in the child is a common pathway to estrangement. It can also happen when the adult child feels in some ways too close to the parent and doesn't know any other way to feel separate. It can happen when the adult child is influenced by their therapist, that they get into therapy and the therapist says, oh, well, the reason you have these issues is because of your childhood, rightly or wrongly. There's a lot of therapists that are creating estrangements by way of making kind of faulty attributions of causality from what the child's childhood was like and then blaming the parent. So there's many pathways to arrive there.
So my understanding of it is estrangement isn't, you're using in a more holistic way to encompass a lot of different ways that a relationship may become strained or separated.
Exactly. Yeah. With the alienation being one of them, but not the only pathway there.
Gotcha. So now I realize that this might be a much bigger question than we have time for in one segment, but I think it's a question that a lot of parents who struggle with the phenomena of estrangement might be asking themselves. And that is this something that can be fixed?
I mean, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends. If it's alienation, sometimes it's a permanent poisoning of the child against the other parent. None of the pathways of estrangement are guaranteed to be fixable. Sometimes an adult child might be too negatively influenced by their spouse or by their own mental illness or by their therapist, but often there's a lot that parents can do. It typically starts with the parent, because from the adult child's perspective, they wouldn't be estranged unless they thought that it was working for them. So typically it means that the parent has to take the initiative. They have to write an amends letter. They have to show empathy for the adult child. They have to take responsibility. They have to show a willingness to do either their own therapy or family therapy. So a lot of these damaged, hurt relationships, estranged, alienated relationships can be healed, but it typically is the parent that has to take the initiative and do the outreach.
If one finds himself in this position, what I hear you saying is that the parent has to really take a look at themselves and do some work with themselves and be prepared for the child in a lot of different ways, whether they'll be abrasive or whether they'll be willing to join in, and really it's a healing journey. It's not a sprint.
Exactly. Yeah, I commonly say that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Sometimes I'll help a parent write an amends letter and the doors will part, and it's the beginning of a very rapid pathway to some kind of a healing or a reconciliation. Other times the amends letter is ignored, or they say, well, okay, but you have to do much more work on yourself or something. So more typically it's a marathon and not a sprint. That's right.
In your experience, what are some of the myths that parents believe, and what's your advice to them about these beliefs that they have?
Well, it goes to what I call the 5 most common mistakes of estranged parents. I mean, one belief is that it should be fair. Reality is, for most parents who've been cut off by their adult children, it isn't fair. Most of the parents who are being cut off these days are parents who are much more dedicated probably than their parents were. They probably spent more time with their kids, they're more psychological, they spent more money on them, they made more sacrifices for them. So in a fair world, they wouldn't be cut off. And so many parents feel like, when they're accused of being emotionally abusive or neglectful or whatever, they feel like, I actually was raised with real, I know this isn't true for me, but a lot of parents will say, I actually was raised with abuse. I can show you what an abusive parent looks like and it's not me, but that doesn't really persuade their child. So one myth is that it should be fair. I mean, it should be fair. It's just not going to get the parent anywhere. So what I commonly tell parents is, don't think about what's fair, think about what's strategic. You have to act in a way that's strategic. And part of that means not thinking about what's fair. Another common one is believing that using guilt is going to persuade your child to come back into contact with you. That ship has sailed. No longer, at least most parents in our culture, have the ability to remind their children of all the sacrifices that they made and all the ways that they were a good, dedicated parent, or maybe that the year before they wrote them a letter saying best mom ever, and now they're saying that they were, abusive and they're rewriting childhood. So you can't use guilt. The third is returning fire with fire. The idea is, a lot of therapists will say, well, you have to stand up to your child and you have to, be much more assertive and don't let them talk to you that way. And that also is not going to be a pathway to reconciliation. The fourth is what you were saying earlier about that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the fifth is that parents often feel like it's all about them. And I don't mean that in a narcissistic way, even though so many of these kids accuse their parents of being narcissistic. It's more that our adult children have their own lives. They're preoccupied with their own children or their marriages or their divorces or their careers or their friends. We're way down the list, even in the best of circumstances. It's what sociologists call the intergenerational stake difference. From parents' perspective, by the time we have children and grandchildren, our adult children or grandchildren are really our central focus, but we're not our central, we're not their central focus. So we often personalize things that they're doing that in response to us that aren't necessarily personal. But then once we make them personal, then it has become a problem. So I think those are some of the 5 most common myths that I would say, mistakes anyway.
Yeah. So I see that a lot, that the parents want the children to hurry up and forgive them, or to hurry up and rejoin them, if there was some valid reasons as to why they're no longer communicating.
Right.
And you're right. A lot of times I'll have to remind them, like, well, they do have 4 children,
Exactly.
right? And a marriage and a
Uh-huh.
career,
Yeah.
right? So, and you're exactly right. It happens in every family. I think that's something that's
Yeah.
very relatable.
Right.
Just kind of be patient. Sometimes the reconciliation between the parent and the child can be hindered because of unforgiveness.
Mhm.
So what is some advice that you would like to share, or that you do share with your clients, about when they get stuck in this unforgiveness?
Are you talking about the parent not being able to forgive the child, or the other way around?
Either or both.
Yeah. Well, I don't think parents should ever ask for forgiveness, because I think that parents aren't really in the position to really demand anything once there's been, a near or complete cutoff. The only thing they can do is sort of show themselves to be vulnerable and open to taking responsibility and showing compassion and being empathic. If anything is going to be persuasive of the child, it's going to be that. I do think that younger generations aren't as forgiving of their parents as they should be. I don't use that word should a lot, but here I do, because I think our culture has changed in a way that's very problematic. I think younger adults today blame too much their parents for how their lives turned out. Parents are somewhat important. They're not nearly as important as my field of psychology leads them to feel. How we turn out to be is partly parents. It's also the generation that you grew up in. It's also your genetics. That's hugely important. It's also your socioeconomic class. It's also your siblings. It's also random good luck and bad luck. Yet there's so much blame being put on parents. And so that gives the adult child this enormous power to say, well, you didn't do X or Y when I was growing up, so I owe you nothing. I just think that it's a terrible way to run a society. I think, older generations or even cultures where there's still some kind of a preservation of the idea of filial obligation and respect is really far healthier. I don't think that means that adult children have to accept abusive behavior from the parent or accept the parent's terms, but I do think that they should be compelled to, if the parent's willing to make amends and work on the relationship or work on themselves, as so many parents in my practice are willing to do, that they deserve some degree of forgiveness from the adult child and some audience with the adult child.
Do you think that the parent needs to forgive the child also? Do they get stuck in that too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a source of a lot of suffering for them, because if, the madder you are at your child, the more unhappy you are going to be. So a lot of what I do in my work is helping parents to just understand why their child is doing what they're doing and why they've chosen the path that they've chosen. For a kid who's alienated, they may be saying terrible, hurtful, cruel things to the parent, but it's because they've been brainwashed to believe what they believe. So of course, a parent's going to feel hurt and mad and misunderstood by that, but their child has also been a victim of that. Similarly, a child who has mental illness. Similarly, a child who's been negatively influenced against the parent because of their who they're married to, or even the therapist. So I think helping parents to see what the influences are, and that their child is, in the same way parents do the best they can, even adult children, when they're behaving terribly, are still doing the best that they can. That can actually be relieving for parents.
Is there anything that you say to them to help them get unstuck? Any resources or anything to help them get out of this unforgiveness? Because I'm sure I've seen it in my practice, and I'm sure you've seen it in yours, where people are just so like they are in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, partly that's a defense against guilt and sorrow, right? I mean, I think anger is a really good defense. The problem is it can have a poisonous and ruinous effect on their lives. So I try to go underneath that, see how much they're really blaming themselves, because often in the same ways that the child's blame of the parent is commensurate with how angry, how hurt they feel or how guilty they feel towards the parent. The parent's blame and anger of the parent towards the adult child is similar. So helping parents to feel more compassion for themselves, more forgiving, to not blame themselves, often that can really help them ease their feelings of anger at their adult child.
And how do you help the child or the parent with the boundaries of re-engaging in this relationship when they sometimes I see them want to jump fully back in to it to almost be the same relationship it was when it stopped, but maybe that's not healthy. Well, it's obviously not healthy if the adult child is now an adult and they were just a child when the estrangement happened. But how do you help them navigate those boundary issues?
A lot of it, particularly if the kid's completely cut off, is really a matter of helping the parent to accept the adult child's rules of re-engagement. Because if the adult child's saying, this is how often you can visit, this is how often you can spend time with my kids, this is how I want you to be with my kids. Parents can say, well, I choose to not accept those terms, but that probably means they're not going to have a relationship with the adult child. So it's kind of incumbent on the parent to accept the terms and tolerate their feelings of sadness or disappointment or humiliation or rejection, because that's the only entryway back into a relationship. But typically, what happens is that if the parents can do that and let the adult child set the terms, and that goes well, then a better, deeper relationship can go from there. But it always starts there, and parents have to be helped to accept those rules of engagement.
Do you often find that a larger majority than maybe you would desire of the parents will be like, well, doesn't that put all the power in the child's hands? And I've already been hurt enough by them and da 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 da. Yeah,
I just empathize with the fact that, it is really unfair. It sucks. I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do about it. That's just the way the culture has changed. Nothing compels an adult child to be in contact with the parent beyond their desire to do that. And from the adult child's perspective, it's working. For the parent, it's not working. It's not fair. It goes back to the mistake or myth number one, that it should be fair.
So when you're working, do you ever work with the child also, or do you just find that the more the parent's accommodating, the more the child comes around?
I do both. Typically, I'll either help the parent write an amends letter to get the child into therapy, or I'll reach out to the child independently if they're ignoring the parent. But doing parent-adult child work is a lot of what I do, but a lot of it looks like what we're describing, that it's helping the parent. Well, I'll commonly tell parents is this isn't marriage therapy, meaning it isn't like you get to come in and make equal demands of your child in the way that you could of your spouse to set the terms of going forward. It's more like one partner's already left and they're willing to give the marriage another chance, but it's going to be on their terms. It's very much what that kind of therapy is like. So it's really incumbent on the parent to show empathy and openness and work on accepting what the child has to say. That doesn't mean they have to, agree to things that never happened. They don't have to say, yes, you're physically abusive or whatever, but they do have to show a commitment to work on empathizing with why the child is needed to cut the parent off or limit contact, and be open to working going forward on the child's terms.
A lot of it has to do with going forward on the children's terms. And I know I hear this a lot in my practice. Sometimes the child will absolutely demand that the only way to go forward is if they get the parent to absolutely say everything they did was wrong. Yeah. So how do you help the parent work through that?
Yeah, that is common. Particularly these days where so many parents are being accused of emotional abuse or neglect or harm or trauma. And from the parent's perspective, it didn't happen, particularly if they feel like they gave their child a far better childhood than anybody ever gave them. I think the statement that I tell parents to make is something like, well, it's clear that I have blind spots, that I wasn't aware that was so hurtful to you. But I'm glad that you told me. And I hope you'll let me know going forward. The next time that occurs, I hope you'll let me know. So it allows them to have a foot in their reality that from their perspective, it didn't occur, but a foot in the adult child's reality by saying, I have blind spots and I wasn't aware that was so hurtful or problematic to you. And I'm glad you told me. The other thing that's really important to highlight here is that from the adult child's perspective, all relationships have to occur in the context of growth and personal happiness. Those are the only rules of engagement from the younger generations perspective. It's not honor thy mother and thy father. It's not respect your elders. It's not family is forever. It's really that. So that's why parents have to really think about this from the perspective of happiness and mental health and respecting boundaries, because that's the language of the adult child.
Oh, it seems like it seems like as the generations have gone on, there's this shift has kind of moved away from the core centrality of the family and the loyalty to the family, regardless of whatever, right? To this more individualistic idea of crafting the family that I desire or I want, or choosing the family that I want. Do you think that that'll be a systemic problem as time goes on if we continue to shift down that road? Do you think we'll see more and more of these types of cases?
Yeah, I don't see that that ending. It seems like as a culture, at least in this moment in time, we're becoming more and more divided against ourselves, more tribal in our outlook. Takes less and less, it seems like, to turn family members against each other. We're getting estrangements over politics and values and a bunch of things that in prior generations weren't. Families have often disagreed about politics, but it wasn't typically enough to tell people I'm never going to talk to you again. Yet today we see that. I don't see anything on the horizon that makes me think that's going to change. To me, it looks like it's only going to increase. So I think it's a cause for concern. We
have about a minute and a half. Is there anything that, any parting thoughts that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Well, several. One, I think it's so important if you're going through an estrangement or alienation to really work on your own self-compassion, your own forgiveness, managing the guilt that you feel. Part of the value of writing an amends letter is you're kind of getting it all out there, because what stays in the dark grows in the dark. So there's something very therapeutic and healing about saying, yeah, these are the ways I screwed up. I'm really sorry. I could see how that could have been hurtful to you. It actually allows you to tolerate those realities rather than feeling like, well, it wasn't so bad, or you're not thinking about all the, the good things that I did. That doesn't really help the parent feel any better. It's far better to just call a spade a spade. And if they don't think they did anything so bad, to say it's clear that I have blind spots, that I wasn't aware that this was so hurtful to you. But really working on self-compassion is critically, I think, is probably one of the most important things that a parent can do.
Joshua, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. And we appreciate you spending the time with us. And we look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Good. Looking forward to that as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today. And don't forget, if you need prayer, send us your prayer requests, and we'll stand in belief with you as we commit to praying over all your prayer requests. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Families Divided.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference in 2023. Alienation, the truth regarding the trauma and abuse, will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join conference event coordinator Elaine Cobb and moderator Dr. Colleen Murray as they introduce you to keynote speakers Dr. Jennifer Harmon and Dr. Edward Kruk. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Dr. Colleen Murray, Bill Eddy, Dr. Noel Hunter, Dr. Sue Cornbluth, Dr. William Burnett, and Megan Hunter. For a limited time only, you can take advantage of a pre-early bird special price for the entire conference coming next October. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference Alienation, the Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. Visit familyaccess.info for all the details. This special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, Steel Partners Foundation, and PASCA, Parental Alienation is Child Abuse.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elaine Cobb. I'm founder and president of Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights. I'm also your host and executive producer of Families Divided TV. We hope that the work that we do through both Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, and now adding this year, Families Divided TV, is helping all of you, especially the alienated family members and also those who are professionals who work in the field of alienation. Next year is going to be an incredible year for us, and I do hope you'll continue to be a part of it and invite many, many others. In the last episode of Families Divided TV for this year, I'll be sitting down with Mark Grady, who is our editor and executive director of Families Divided TV. We're going to be sharing a lot of what is going to be going on for next year. So I encourage you, if you are not a subscriber yet to our Families Divided TV YouTube channel, please do so. It doesn't cost you anything, and you'll get firsthand knowledge of everything going on strictly through the YouTube channel. You're going to also now, even if you're a subscriber and if you become one, you'll be getting immediately new additions to our YouTube channel that I add weekly, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. So all of these things can help you. We've got some great things in store. So I encourage you to please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It also helps us through YouTube and then recognizing us, because alienation, as we all know, is extremely important. And as a niche, we want to be recognized to help many, many others who don't even realize they're in the middle of alienation. Their families are getting ready to be divided if they haven't already. And we want to help in every way we can through many professionals in doing all we can to possibly not let this happen. And if it has happened, to help through it. So please, if you would, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, because you want to be a part of everything going on for next year. And to do that, you need to be a part of that. We're going to even be starting live segments through our YouTube. So go ahead and subscribe and get ready for a great 2023 and helping to bring more recognition to alienation as it is abuse. Thanks and God bless.
On next week's Families Divided, Dr. Sue Cornbluth speaks on finding the power to reconnect with your children.